Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is the first event of 2024 for Readers, Books and Conversation, the PBC monthly readers event. It's so good to have you all with us. We started it last year and we could only have dreamed about crowds like this. So thank you very much. I wanted to start by acknowledging that we're on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to welcome people who are here, any people who are here this evening who are First Nations. The way tonight's going to work, in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to our esteemed guest, Suzie Miller. We're going to do the usual. I'll have a conversation with Suzie for about 45 minutes, and we will leave a good 15 minutes for your questions at the end, and the lights will come back on and there'll be a roving mic, so you can sit comfortably and relax. You will have seen that delightful book table at the back on your way in. Suzie will be there at the end, so you can buy copies of her plays or her novel, Prima Facie, and she can sign them for you and you can have a bit of a natter then as well. Tonight, though, we are enormously lucky to have Suzie Miller with us. She may be a local, but we've got her in between an international book tour, Interstate Writers Festival, and talking to the UN. Yeah. But let me tell you a bit about Suzie before we dive in. Suzie Miller is an internationally acclaimed playwright, screenwriter and author. Her works explore injustice from deeply human, small-scale and often individual perspectives. Her plays have been produced in over 40 productions around the world, winning multiple prestigious awards, and she's been commissioned by or been in residence at theatres including London's National Theatre, the National Theatre of Scotland, Griffin Theatre Australia, Theatre Gargantua in Canada, and Malthouse Theatre also in Australia. In 2020, her play, the drama Prima Facie, premiered at the Griffin Theatre, and it won the 2020 AWGIE Award for drama, and then it went on to win every other theatre award you can think of. It opened in 2022 in London's prestigious West End, starring Jodie Comer from Killing Eve, and then it transferred in 2023 to Broadway in the USA, and it's a play that's also now been translated into over 20 languages, which is extraordinary. And it's about to be a film, which we'll talk about as well this evening. In 2023, I should add as well that Prima Facie Jodie Comer won the Tony Award for Best Actress. It won the Olivier Award for Best New Play, and it won the Best Actress Award as well at the Olivier's. Suzie's theatre credits are numerous, and they include last year's Jail Baby, as well as RBG, which we'll also talk about this evening, the wonderful celebration of the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Susie's also developing a number of film and television projects, which we might try and get into if we have time. You can see we're going to be packing it in this evening. And she was recently invited to speak at the UN, that was no joke, in New York about art and culture and sexual assault. There is nothing Suzie Miller can't do. Please join me in making her very welcome.
We're old friends. We've done this a number of times.
Here we are, back on stage.
My favourite interviewer.
Love it. I wanted to start, before we dive into the plays, which I know people really want to hear about. I think a lot of people know that you were a lawyer first.
I was, yeah.
For your sins. And not a barrister, we should stress. And before that, you actually studied chemistry at university. But I wanted to ask you two things. Why the law, to begin with?
Yeah.
And when did you know that you wanted to write as well, not necessarily in place of?
Yeah, really good question, because I think I knew I wanted to write before I was a lawyer. I think that's sometimes the way in, that you start to use words in a practice, so you write on your own at home, and then you think, I'm a word person, and even though I was doing science at the time, I thought, I'm very much a person. I was actually at the time doing my honours year in immunology, and I was doing lab work, and it was so isolating and so exhausting, and so it was just all this time where you didn't talk to anyone. And I remember Chernobyl happened, which was horrible. And I remember looking up from my microscope, because it was on the radio, and thinking, oh, this is terrible, all these people. And everyone else looked up from their microscope and went, oh yeah, I know what the stoichiometry of that particular chemical is. And they went that. And I thought, yeah, these aren't my people. I mean, because I'm
no offense to any immunologist here.
I actually love science. It was just more that I thought, this is a really social thing, and we should be talking about what this means for human beings. And then I think I was about to embark on a PhD, and I just did a switch and went to law instead. Which I then did for a very long time. And I have to say, I really enjoyed being a lawyer. It's not that I left because I hated it at all. I did human rights and litigation, and I was in court every day, and basically doing really strong cases that were like public interest cases and for young people. and very much with the human rights in a criminal defence perspective. And so, you know, my work was varied and amazing and really interesting, but I always wrote, and then I got really sick in '95 when I was doing my Masters in Theatre and Film at UNSW. And I remember thinking, gee, life's really short. You better choose what you want to do fast. And, you know, I recovered from that illness, but I also thought, yeah, okay, like you can't just coast, you have to make a decision.
Yeah.
So I made the decision to go to NIDA and become a playwright, and then I did both for a long time until it was untenable to do both. And I kind of hit a kind of T intersection. I could either turn left and get a promotion in law to like the judiciary, or I could turn right and go to the National Theatre in London and do a residency. So I chose the one that had no pay, basically, much to my husband's horror. He was like, what, we're moving to London and you're not even going to get paid much? Like, this is crazy. But it was the best thing I ever did, and I actually love my job so much. It's such a lovely thing to really just love your job. And it means you don't take holidays, because your whole, like, every day is what you would do on holidays. But then I think, maybe I just want to do nothing, just for a couple of weeks. But
I think by the time you hear what Suzie does, she can't do nothing. There's just no way that she can do that. Let's talk about Prima Facie. I thought we'd talk about the play before we talk about the novel, because it was very successfully turned into a novel, which it was a very big seller last year. How did the idea, I mean, you've mentioned that you were in court every day, that you worked with people from a criminal perspective, even though you weren't a barrister yourself. How did the idea for Prima Facie take shape? And why did you feel it was the thing you had to write?
Yeah, I mean, I think way back when I was at law school, when I was doing criminal law and learning about two things. First of all, learning about rape and sexual assault, and recognising that some of the questions they asked made it almost impossible for a woman to ever get across the line in terms of a conviction. And while I totally believe in innocence until proven guilty, I thought, well, if there's never a hope of ever getting a conviction, why would you even pretend? And I think that I had a lot of arguments with people about that, because the whole idea of being a criminal barrister is that there's the cabaret rule, where you'll take whatever case you get, which is why I didn't go to the bar. It's why I stayed as a special solicitor, because I thought I can reject cases on sexual assault because I don't think I want to do them. And I thought I don't think I could cross-examine someone in good faith, because I don't actually trust the system when it comes to sexual assault. But every time I had that conversation with criminal barristers, they were very much, I guess, at odds with that. And I understand why. And then I thought, you know, one day I'll write why, what my perspective is on this, because I also did gender and the law at university, and that just opened my eyes to just how, I mean, and in the play and in the book, one of the things that the character says is, once you see, you cannot unsee. So once you see an injustice, it starts to reveal itself more and more. And I think that for me, I had to find the words to articulate it. And it took me some time before I could, but I thought, what would the best character be to show this notch in the law, or this inconsistency that people don't seem to see? And Tessa was the character that came up for me. But ironically, you know, before I wrote the play, I wrote so much about this character and this world that I remember thinking, oh, this is actually a book. It's not really a play, but I thought, I was intending to write the play, so I will write the play and I'll come back and do the book, which is basically what I did.
And I want to come back to that idea of Tessa as the kind of the difference between bringing Tessa to life on the page, in a novel form. But why, you know, we've seen over many years, you know, you think about some of the amazing plays you've seen, like Angels in America, there's a mega cast. Why did you feel that Prima Facie, for that particular story, that it needed to be what you call a monodrama?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One is I just wanted to very much have a woman's experience of something happening, and I also wanted us to see the sexual assault happening but not have to witness it, really. But we knew it was real and it was really happening to her, and then we see the re-narratising or the repackaging of that event in court later, and you see the unfairness. And in that way, if it's only her on stage, then even when she describes the rape as it's happening, and we totally believe it's happening, we see how she's demolished in court later, and it's made to look like there are all these reasons that she made it up. And I think it kind of illustrates it well without having to sort of sit through a kind of male character like acting like they're sexually assaulting someone on stage. I just didn't want to have that.
100%. Yeah.
So it was interesting. I mean, and it was a very easy, once I had all the information behind me and I knew the character really well and I'd written so much, but it was also based on when I was a lawyer. There was a period where I'd take 6 statements a week, pretty much, sometimes a day even, from young women who'd been sexually assaulted. So I worked with young people under 25, and their social worker would bring them to our practice, which was in King's Cross, which is a kind of funded by a lot of corporate law firms, and one in particular, Freenels. And basically we were paid very well and were trained very well to be specialist criminal litigators. And we would take down statements from young women who'd been assaulted so that we could apply to the Victims' Compensation Tribunal and get money for them to have counselling and to actually sort of help put their lives back together. But so that they would make those statements without any real reason to get anything out of that. And the statements started to sound so similar that I thought, basically all these women are saying, I don't know why, but I froze. Like, I didn't think about running or hitting them back because I knew I had no hope. And so I did a lot of research into that and realised it's actually a really good survival technique for women in that scenario, because to try and outrun or outfight someone that's physically so much bigger than you is almost like to provoke further violence. And so the psyche either freezes and just is in shock and just gets through it, or they try to talk the person into being their friend so that they can somehow get out of it. But both of those ways of surviving the sexual assault and a rape, when it's in court, it doesn't look like you were saying no. It looks like you were trying to befriend someone, or that you were just letting it happen. And so it was about recognising that the way we see the world is through the eyes of men, not through the eyes of women, and what is actually a really common survival technique in times of great stress and violence. A woman's response to that is very different.
It's something you do very powerfully in the novel particularly, and in the play, which is to make all of us rethink what a victim looks like. Not only how they behave, but who they are. You know, and I'm assuming that everyone who's here tonight to hear Suzie Miller is familiar with Prima Facie, but for any of you who've come along who aren't yet and you haven't read the book, you know, Tessa is this person. She's the first person in her family, maybe even in her town, to make it to university. It's in the novel, it's set in England, but it was started in Australia to begin with. And she's got this kind of shiny life she's made for herself, where she feels like she's on top of everything. You know, she's doing really well in court. She's having these conversations with her colleagues about which case they're going to take, and in the middle of what she believes is going to be a fairly benign evening, this terrible sexual assault happens, and we sort of see everything twist. She's somebody who believed in the law from the inside, and then has to see how the law operates from the outside. Let's talk.
That's a great précis. I wish I could.
Your work inspires us. What can I say? Let's talk about the novel now as well, because I wanted to know, you've mentioned it a bit and we really want to hear more about it. You said you started to collect all this information about not just about women, but about Tessa, that she became clearer and clearer to you. And that all the way back then in 2018, or early, even maybe when you were writing the play, you thought, there's a novel in here. How did you know, and what did you do differently with taking this story from a stage story to a novel?
Well, first of all, I have to really give credit to my fabulous agent, who I think is even in the room, Jane Murback. And she read the play and saw the novel. And even though I'd sparked a novel before I wrote the play, I thought, well, I've never written a novel, so how would I know what a novel is? I mean, I've read loads of novels, obviously. But I thought, I guess my pen personship is playwriting and screenwriting, because I do a lot of screenwriting. But there was so much psychological excavation that I wanted to do on the character, and to really, I guess, because it's about the lived experience of a woman that goes through a class confrontation as well as a legal confrontation, I wanted to really excavate the psychological drama in that, and you can't really do that on stage as effectively, and you certainly can't go back to the extent that I wanted to in 90 minutes on stage. And I really wanted to talk about her family in context as well, whereas they only appear very briefly in the play, and I actually had a really strong sense of where she comes from, and the grit that she has to get to the law is one of the driving reasons that she takes the case to court, because for her to not do that, she felt like she was silencing herself after having worked so hard to get a voice. And I feel like, you know, there's and I wanted to explain that really clearly in the book, because I'm under no illusions that women get anything necessarily out of taking a sexual assault case to court, but I feel like some women have a need to take it because otherwise they're scared they'll be sort of shut down as a consequence. But by the same token, you know, given that the law is quite faulty around this area, I can see why people go, I actually don't want to go through it. So it's not a judgment call to not, but I wanted to explain why someone like Tessa did take it to court, and that whole psychological excavation is about, she believed in the law. The law was her saviour in many ways. It gave her this power and this income and this capacity to really support her family. and to feel really good about herself and have great self-esteem, and sort of prized her after her intellectual capacity and the scholarship she won with this great career. But that all goes away if she stops believing in the law. And so she had a real fight on her hands. It wasn't just about bringing the man to justice, but about her saying to the law itself, I want to believe in you, show me that you'll do the right thing. And then when it doesn't, it kind of throws a lot up for her in a way.
It's enormously moving. You do something fascinating in the novel. You know, when you see the play, you're watching this extraordinary actor perform this very difficult storyline, all these experiences, but you don't describe Tessa in the novel.
Yeah,
Tell us why. I know why. Tell us why.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, just my instinct was not to describe her because I wanted Tessa to be every woman. And, you know, but by the time it got to the West End and Broadway, there had already been someone that played Tessa in Australia, and then Jodie Comer took it on and very much made it her own, and very much also, I guess, basically gave a face to Tessa. And I thought it's now been on in, I think, 32 countries or something, the play, in so many different languages. And, you know, there's black Tessas, there's Chinese Tessas, Japanese Tessas, there's every country you can imagine. And I thought that makes it, so by the time the novel came out, I felt that I'd really fulfilled my promise of making Tessa every woman, so that whoever reads the novel goes, this could be me or my cousin or my daughter or my friends. And I think that's really important because it actually does happen to people we know and love and to ourselves. So it's like in a way, Jodie, by playing Tessa on stage, she's such a beloved actress that people suddenly went, oh, this intelligent woman that's Jodie Comer on stage, this has happened to her. I don't feel ashamed if it happens to me or someone I know. Like, it's not the exception, it's more of something that is very commonly a threat for women.
I have to say, Jodie Comer is incredible. She's such an incredible performer. But you were actually a bit reticent to have her cast in the play. Can you share that story?
It's such an embarrassing story. I'm sure people that are here have heard it before, but, you know, I was sitting casting with the producer and the director, who were all British. Actually, you know what? He hates me saying he's British because he's married to an Irish woman. Anyway, I said, yeah, but you've got a British passport.
We won't tell.
Yeah, no. And so they were politely going through names of actresses, some of which were really well known. I went, oh no, they're too posh or whatever. And they said, what about Jodie Comer? And I said, oh, I don't know who that is. Who's Jodie Comer? And they said, oh, she plays Villanelle in Killing Eve, which I'd watched and thought, what an amazing actress. And I said, oh, she's amazing, but no way, we don't want her. And they went, okay. They didn't go, why? They went, okay, next. And then at the end, when we had got to the point where everyone had either not been ruled in, had been ruled out or not totally ruled in, there was sort of this silence. Everyone was a bit down because, you know, like no one's really suiting the character. And then the director sort of plucks up the courage. He goes, no offence, but, you know, why not Jodie Comer? And I went, well, she's Russian. Why would we cast a Russian actress? No, she's not Russian, she's from Liverpool. Oh my God, this is amazing. So if he hadn't asked that question, and Jodie loves this story because she goes, but for him asking you, I wouldn't have known why I didn't get the role. I'm like, I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Gosh. I said, that's how good you were, being Russian. Yeah. So.
I mentioned in the intro that there's a film version. You've written the film version as well.
Yeah.
So we've got this kind of the very visual experience, the visual intellectual experience of seeing a performer on stage. Then we have this very psychologically expansive experience of reading the novel. Mm-hmm. And now we're back in a visual medium. Where did you find the story contracting or expanding for you? How did you approach that?
Point. So the film is different again because it's very much visual medium, so there's a lot more jumping around. But also we've cast Cynthia Erivo in the film as that way of saying let's extend the possibilities.
For people who don't know, I first heard of Cynthia Erivo because she's got this unbelievable voice. She's an incredible Broadway musical theatre performer. She's a very beautiful African. Is she British?
She's British.
She's a British woman. So she's again a very different Tessa.
And she also has just finished Wicked, the film, like 1 and 2. So we were lucky to get her actually because she's about to just go be enormous.
Even bigger.
But she very much wanted to do it. And you know, it was this thing where I thought this is exciting to sort of really move into a different way, and she's really contributed to the racial components of the piece, which ironically, you know, every time I tried to write something in, she'd go, the minute I walk in the room, it's already in the room, you don't have to write it in. And it was, you know, that sobering recollection and re-acknowledgement that, you know, when you are othered by the sort of dominant paradigm, you're very aware of it when you walk into a room that something changes when you become part of the room. And so I've had some great talks with her and her producing partner, who's another wonderful, actually she's American, so she's African-American woman. And in general, it's been, you know, like an incredible experience, but also we have a female director, which we had a male director for the play, a really wonderful male director who came up, if anyone's seen it, at the NT Live version or the West End Broadway version, he came up with this idea at the end where the folders that have been there the whole time start to light up. And when he pitched that to me, I thought, you totally know what I'm trying to do with this play. And it made total, and he was just such a really soft, gentle, actually he grew up in Australia, I didn't know that until, you know, like this British guy who grew up in Australia, this great director. Yeah, absolutely, he was terrific. So, and we're working on a couple of other plays together at the moment, so that's really, we have such a shortcut. It's one of those great creative simpatico. But when it came to the film, because it's very much about the gaze of the filmmaker, I wanted it to be a female gaze.
Who is the director?
Gaze. It's actually Suzie White, who she did some of, I mean, my husband's very excited because she did some of that new Star Wars TV series.
Okay. That's so cool. That's why he's excited.
Yeah, exactly. But she's a great feminist and a really great woman, and she's been around for quite a long time. She's got a great body of work, and she's very committed to this. This is one of her big projects. So, yeah. About to start shooting it soon, I think, so it'll be interesting. Exciting. Yeah.
So, I mean, Prima Facie has been a play, a novel, but it's also taken on a life of its own, and it's changed the law in the UK. How did that happen? How did it end up being something that judges are being asked to watch before they do sentencing in sexual assault cases? And I understand that police now are watching it as well, watching the film of the NT Live version.
It's kind of amazing because I think you write something, and you know, when I wrote this play, especially the play, I remember thinking a one-woman show about sexual assault and rape that's funny. Like, I don't think anyone's ever going to put this on. And I really didn't expect it to go on, but I had this passion to write it anyway. And then when it went on and it did so well in Australia, and then it got picked up, it kind of had, it was like a sort of rolling snowball. It sort of, whatever they collect along the way. But I felt like it was no longer mine. It now belongs to all the people that have worked on it in a way. And what was really amazing was, while it was on the West End, I got a phone call from a judge from the Old Bailey at 9 a.m. one morning, and it wasn't a judge that I knew, because I know quite a few of them, and she got my number from one of the barristers, and she was a very senior judge, and she's in charge of writing the directions to the jury. So when the judges read something out to the jury about a certain crime, they have to give them some guidance. And she just on the phone said, you know, I saw your play last night, and I've sat up all night, and I'm really confronted by what I saw, and I have to fix something. And she said, basically, I've redrafted the direction to the jury on sexual assault and rape for the whole of the UK, where it says something like, and she used words from the play. I know, it was amazing. It was amazing. It's not me.
It's a little bit you.
Well, no, but I think what's really interesting is the way art affects change is it doesn't actually actively seek to change. What it does is it creates enough of a story that when people come to see it, people who have the power to make the change feel that they can and they will. And so now when they read out to the jury, you know, like the directions, they say, just because the victim didn't remember it in chronological order, or they forgot some peripheral details, or some of the timing was wrong, does not mean they're lying. It might mean that they're a traumatized victim, which was never said before. And I thought that was that idea of freezing as well, that sometimes to freeze is actually a very legitimate survival technique. So that was kind of like, I put the phone down, and you know, I've done a law degree, a master's in law, I've been a lawyer for years and years. And I thought that might be the most, that 5 minutes might be the best use of all that study, because that woman got it, and she actually had the capacity to affect massive change. So there was that judge, and then another judge at the Old Bailey got hold of the NT Live version, and now all of the judges in Northern Ireland who are about to sit on rape cases have to watch the video of Jodie doing, I mean, gosh, it's funny, isn't it, really? Because I know that there was another time, so they have to watch that before they can sit on a rape trial, which I think is quite profound. But when I was in Australia, the Law Reform Commission came to see the play because they were going to look at consent. I remember they came to a Wednesday matinee, and I thought, they're getting paid by the state to come and see my show. That's a cool job. But there was another thing that I think was really, so aside from those two judges, there was also a group of 3,000 police officers in North Yorkshire. So it's some pretty, 30 years practice, pretty tough old police officers. And they said when they watched the film of the play, and now I think they read the book as well, But when they watched it, a lot of them wrote to me and said, I realised that the police officer and what he does is what I've done for years. I didn't even realise I was actually alienating the person who was giving evidence or the person that was trying to make a complaint. And I promise you I'll be better now, because now I see it. And I thought, well, these old guys writing to me with that was really quite remarkable for me. So there's been lots of, in Australia I've been asked to speak at the Judicial Commission of various states, as well as at a higher level. So, all I can do is speak what I'm saying here and hope that people are inspired enough to think, oh yeah, that makes sense, why can't we do something new about it?
But it's amazing that it's happened in Australia. I think the last time you and I spoke about it, you said that hadn't happened yet. There'd been this kind of knock-on effect in the UK, but not yet in Australia.
But I think you saying that made someone in the audience go out to the Judicial Commission. So I guess what I'm saying is that, it's not just me, it's the voices of so many that have chipped in, and somewhere along the line, the people that have the power to effect that change with a stroke of a pen actually go, yeah, I'm going to effect the change. So there's something about, I do think that there's strength in women together, united, and actually speaking out.
Yeah. I want to ask you about speaking at the UN, but before we do that, we mentioned before that the play Prima Facie has been translated into, I think it's 20 languages.
Well, it's more now. I think it's like
more. And I think you mentioned to me that someone's told you that it's the most translated play now. Is it of all time?
Well, no. I think Strindberg and Shakespeare.
So we're getting close. We're getting close.
Bit of modern times, they said, which is a shock to me as well. I'm like, really? Gosh. One of the funny things about that was, I think my husband sent me a text once. I was in London, he was in Australia, and he goes, look, and I'm going, what is it? He goes, it's the billboard in Slovenia or something. As people are driving to work, I'm like, this is just surreal. But the other thing is that the Spanish countries have taken it on really strongly. But I thought the translation in Spain would be the one that would go to Latin America, but there's like 10 different versions of Spanish local dialect.
That's what I wanted to ask you about, which is, from what you understand, and the languages you speak and the people you've spoken to about these different translations, what is preserved and what changes in order to still keep that central
I have no idea. I don't know, because I don't speak any other languages.
It's fascinating though across culture that the tip of that arrow of the meaning of what it means to take a woman seriously, to believe a woman, to rethink how we look at the law has cut through in all those cultures.
But also, it's strictly speaking in the form that it's in for the book and the play, but it's gone out into translation into countries that don't have the adversarial system.
Yes.
So I think that the gist of the work, it's actually about the rhythm of voice and words. So it's very much a very basic storytelling technique that's based on speaking aloud. And they said, you can, in the same way that you can't take it, so you can take someone that's got no sight to the theatre and they will have that oral experience of the way that the words have been directed to be spoken and the way the actor has actually, I guess, embodied those words. And there's something magical about that. Whereas, that's not what you get when you watch a film or television. You don't constantly listen to the rhythm of the wordplay and so as a writer, it's a lovely medium to work in when that's the basis of the medium. And I think the same with prose. This was such an enjoyable experience for me, because for the first time I was writing without having to sort of go tab, character, tab. But even more than that, just to sort of stretch out that long muscle and allow myself to really be allowed to tell the whole story without an actor or director going, oh no, that's too long, cut that down, or oh no, she would never say that. How do you know? I don't have my character. So there was something lovely about being on my own and just being able to grapple with that without having to take it to a read with actors and directors and producers. And then I have my, by the time I got to my agent and the publishers, there was just this incredible support around it that I just thought, it's quite a different medium. In theatre, the writer is just one of many, whereas in prose, the writer very much is quite honoured for being able to write like such a lengthy piece of work. And, the thing in theatre is that once you've produced it and it goes, you actually basically hand your baby over and hope to hell that it make a mess of it. Whereas with you do have the last say when it comes to writing prose, and there's something magnificent about that in terms of feeling that you've really been heard.
It's a beautiful moment to hear from our audience. So we're going to turn the lights on, and I think Hayley's going to have a roving mic, and we've got time for your questions.
Just do one moment. There we go.
Oh, there you are.
There you all are. Lovely. So if you have a question for Suzie, Hayley has a microphone and she's up the back and she can come to you. It's always hard to go first. There we go, down the very front. Thanks. Oh, what's a microphone coming to you?
I'd just like to hear something about jailbait.
We will give you a mic because people up the back can't hear you. Sorry, here we go. There you go.
Oh, hi. I saw Jailbaby and thought it was absolutely brilliant and horrifying.
Yeah.
And I just wondered whether that was based on any of your legal experience.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
is it really that bad?
Yeah, it really is.
There was a question up the back about Jailbaby, which was a play that was on stage last year, and the question was, was it based on Susie's own experience, and are things really that bad?
Yeah, they really are, and I think that the reason we don't know about it is there's so much shame attached to young people that go to prison who have a really bad, violent sexual experience. Because it's basically heterosexual men asserting power over younger prisoners. And I had lots of clients that came out of prison, even more recently, people that I work with who still said, I had 2 today, But they would tell you as their lawyer, but they would say, don't tell anyone else, and you can't tell my girlfriend because she'll think that I'm gay, But, really horrific stories. And I think that was based on it because I thought about it for so long and thought, really this is state-sanctioned torture that we're all allowing to happen in our names. I'm just as guilty as everyone else. I mean, we're holding placards outside Parliament House saying, wait a minute, don't privatise our prisons, don't limit the amount of supervision and allow this to happen to young boys, because they come out the other end and they might have gone in for property offences and they come out really violent after they've been so preyed upon, and then they're walking around in the streets, and what have we done? We've just created really extreme violence where there wasn't before often. So that was what that play was about, but it was also about different families and showing how different, if you have a family that has any sort of power, whether it be education or finance or whatever, you are in a very different situation when it comes to justice. It's not justice is blind, it's very much not blind. And I think, it's actually a little bit in conversation with Prima Facie, that case, and there's a third one as well, which is basically about a woman whose son is accused of a sexual assault. And she's a judge, and this is my next play that's coming up. It's the first time I've spoken about it, actually.
Wow.
So I think it's going on at the National Theatre in London. It's opening there next January. But
Amazing.
I only just found that out, yeah. But, it's sort of like the one that if you see all 3, you go, okay, we should be taking these things to court, but what happens if someone's found guilty and they go to prison, and is that really solving the problem? And I guess the other thing is, is there ever any sort of form of justice where sometimes there can be other ways of dealing with it, where we can maybe just have some kind of, apology. Sometimes all women want is an acknowledgement and an apology. They don't necessarily want, some women do, and I fully support that, but sometimes they think, this is someone I knew, and I just want them to actually acknowledge this happened and not deny my truth, and to apologise and make good on that. And there's no real possibility of that. It's all or nothing at the moment. And I'm not saying that even it shouldn't be. I just think that the whole system doesn't work.
We've got time for more questions. Yep, in the middle, bro. Thanks, Mel.
Hi Suzie, thank you for your work. It's amazing. And I saw RBG last week and was absolutely astounded by Heather Mitchell, who's just incredible in the role.
She's great. Yeah.
At the end of both Prima Facie and RBG, I felt a sense of completion, but also there's kind of a circular nature to them both.
Yeah.
That these things will keep going on. What are the things that give you hope for the future and for the next generation?
I think young women really give me hope, actually. The next generation of young women are really strong about speaking up and actually claiming the space that they so should be able to occupy. I think that, and a general awareness. I think one of the things in Prima Facie I was shocked by was, whenever I did a Q&A, I would talk about the fact that every woman I know has walked home from the station or the tube, and they carry their keys in a certain way and their phone in another way, and they're hyper vigilant about who crossed the road and why, and whether to lag back or lag forward. And I said, basically, they're scared of being raped and murdered, not that someone's going to steal their iPhone. And a lot of the men were really shocked by that. And I thought, gosh, that's just an everyday knowledge for me and most of the women I know. It's just something we just know is part of our lives. But it shocked me into going, how have we accepted this? This is crazy that 52% of the population can feel that unsafe. And that really upset me, but it also made me realise that there's so much to be done, but it starts with that awareness. And one of the things that the producer of the play did with Prima Facie was set up this thing called the Schools Consent Project, and they basically send barristers out, volunteer barristers, out to schools all over Britain where they talk to young people about consent, and they get really hairy questions and really interesting responses and so on. But there really is a forum to talk about what does consent mean, how do you ascertain consent, and it kind of challenges that idea that somehow there seems to be some divide between sexuality, that men, once they're aroused to a certain level, can't stop themselves or something, as if that's unique to men, or that men are the only ones that are aroused. But I think also there's been generations and generations of men that haven't had to ask for consent, and they're shocked that suddenly there's an obligation to actually ascertain that it exists. And it's a really simple thing. It's just saying, is this okay? I mean, it's not a big ask. And I think that, when in doubt, that's actually always what should be happening. And I think we should be raising our boys to, and I think we are trying to, and in most occasions doing so. And I think that there's a culture of sort of 24/7 pornography that kind of increases the stakes about what's violent and what's not constantly. And you have to have open discussions about those things. I mean, I've tried to with my kids. But it's not always easy. It's not always sometimes it's really, you do it at the worst possible time and you find out they weren't even watching porn and you're busy talking about it.
Now I've given them ideas.
Yeah, I know. But, and I think that, I think Australians are a lot more open about talking about sex than the Brits are. I think that's been something that I really noticed, and it is one of the differences, is they go, oh, I never thought to talk about that. But yeah, I do think that young women really inspire me. I feel that they have an understanding and an awareness and an expectation of a standard that I don't think I had in my early 20s. I think I could look back on my 20s and think, there's a bit of coercive stuff happening there, and it's not everything was as cut and dry as I'd like to think it was. And I think that once you're sort of put in a position where you re-examine, and you're also aware that the men of the time thought their role was to sort of talk you into having sex, because somehow you had to be the virginal person that didn't give up easily on rejecting them. And it's such a funny dilemma, I think, because that's no longer the case, but the courts persist in sort of putting to women on the stand saying something like, well, you had sex with this man and then you regretted it and were embarrassed, so you went to the police and said you were raped. And I think, well, are you even aware of what modern sexuality is? Everyone's on dating apps.
And the discussion in the novel where the lawyers, the barristers are talking to each other about a sexual assault victim, were like, well, obviously she wanted to have sex because she was wearing black underpants, obviously. And they're young people having this conversation for real. It's an astounding thing. Yeah, but I think also, how many women in court when I know for myself that, they would say that in court and all the women would be thinking, oh my God, I didn't know the fact that I was wearing these undies is like something that would get me in trouble if something happened. But there's lots of mixed messages around it. And I think it's just recognising it's complicated, that it's hard to navigate, but it's about just simple humanity as well. We've got time for one more, I think, if there is one more. There are no hands going up straight away. I wanted to ask you, Suzie, you mentioned that there's a play coming in January, but you mentioned you're working on all these amazing screenplays, on an adaptation of Bruni and other things. What are some of the other things that we might get to see and hear and enjoy from Suzie Miller in the coming 12 months?
Oh wow, that's amazing. Well, hopefully the film will come out after it's edited, and I have a couple of other plays in London, and another play here, which is, I'm actually involved in another big play which is called Strong is the New Pretty, which is based on the first ever year of women's AFL, that inaugural season. And it's really about, well, actually I wrote it the first year, but MTC were like, no one goes to watch football shows. This is not a football show. It's about how many levels they had to break through. They had to break through at the ground level, dad throws the ball to the boy, but not the girl. They had to break through at the economic level. They had to break through at the boardroom level. And I was privy to a really close friend of mine who was the first female commissioner of the AFL. So I know all the inside stories about the first time they had the uniform that all the men said, "Oh, we've got spares, we can give them." And then she's going, "No, you don't understand. It's not about just, they have to be designed for women's bodies." They're like, "Oh, yeah, maybe." And you sort of, so there's some funny stuff like that, but also all those women in that inaugural season, most of them had full-time jobs as well.
And they had 1950s where you're a butcher and a great rugby player.
Yeah. But you know, all the equivalent AFL men's players were getting paid a fortune to do the same job. So, and then of course what happened is the shock to the AFL that it was such a money bringer that I don't know much about money, that's why I bought it. But you know, it was such an income raiser that they suddenly went, "Oh God, how have we missed this?" And I think that's my point, is you don't see it until you see it. And when you see it, you go, "That's been sitting under our nose all this time and we never exploited that great marketing opportunity."
I think one of the first AFL women games in Sydney, you know, Sydney and AFL in Sydney has taken a long time to really get going, even though people love the Swans now. For years you can't see it in any pubs. That 20,000 people turned up one of those first games, and they just had to turn all these people away. And they were, you know, just people were really interested.
This is which one?
The AFL women's one in the first season.
I thought you were talking about the men's. I was going to say that my auntie, who's 85 and lives in Melbourne, she was head of the Keep South at South campaign when the Swans were coming to Sydney.
My God.
She still is so resentful that they're called Sydney Swans.
I love it, just let it go. It's gone.
Exactly. She was tying ribbons around oak trees and things. It's very funny like that. So yeah, hilarious.
I'm going to do a few things in reverse. I'm going to let you know that obviously Susie's books are at the back. You can ask her any more questions down there. She'll be signing them. I want to let you know that we're back here on March 28th with a wonderful work of non-fiction called Kin, about how families are changing, about the use of technology to reshape or to redefine families that we've already been making. So I hope that, you know, you'll come along with chapters on IVF and surrogacy, but it's told by the investigative reporter about how the law and society kind of changes when we push it, and how technology has changed that as well. But in this moment, I wanted to thank you all for being with us this evening, but I particularly want to thank Suzie Miller for something in particular, which is that, you know, for all the words of yours that we hear on the page, on the stage, that we're going to hear on the screen, but most importantly, I think, for reminding us as adults that words really can change the world.
Yeah.
Thank you, Suzie Miller.
Congratulations.